This is Frank Gaffney with the Secure Freedom Minute. President Trump reportedly has under consideration deploying a powerful new weapon against communist Chinese aggression that is now becoming evident in virtually every conceivable domain. It would involve ending China's ability to use Americans' pension funds and other investments to underwrite the threats the PRC poses to us. What a concept. By deregistering companies linked to the Chinese Communist Party, and let's face it, they pretty much all are, we can stop them from raising mega billions on our capital markets. As a result, U.S. investors would no longer enable, for example, Chinese corporations that are building Beijing's police state apparatus, its man-made and fortified South China Sea islands, and its next generation of naval combatants. Wall Street is furiously lobbying to let it keep funding our enemy. One of its alumni, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, is too. Just say no, Mr. President.
Frank Gaffney is with me, Executive Chairman of the Center for Security Policy and Vice Chair of the Committee on the Present Danger of China, presentdangerchina.org for that one. And that was his Secure Freedom Minute, which you can get at his websites as well. Center for Security Policy is securefreedom.org or counterjihad.com. Frank, this is pretty stunning. It even prompted you to give me a phone call yesterday, which is which is interesting. And I was blown away by this. I was not aware of this. You're educating me. You're educating the audience. What's going on here?
What's been going on for some time, Alex, is that the folks on Wall Street have seen it to be enormously lucrative to provide almost unlimited funding to communist China. They've done it in a number of ways, but most immediately of concern is the fact that America's pension funds and other institutional investments, as well as that of private individuals, have been going into something called the Morgan Stanley MSCI, All Country World Index, which has in recent years, I think in fact just in the past year, begun to incorporate companies that are doing the sorts of things I described in that commentary, that are amassing threats to the people of China, to other nations that they're exporting their so-called social credit score totalitarian security system to, and weapon systems that are being used to threaten us as well as others. There are fortified islands that are being built. There are sanctioned companies. You can't do business with these companies, according to the United States government, but you can invest in them. These are the sorts of things most Americans, most investors, I think, have no idea is going on. And frankly, Wall Street does not seem to care that it's a danger to our national security. You know,
and Wall Street cares about making money. That's security. Sure, Wall Street's obligations are to their shareholders, and that's kind of the precept that they have, is that the whole key to Wall Street is that they're just trying to make money. So so Frank, how do we stop this? What do we have to do to stop it?
Well, the most immediate opportunity to stop it, Alex, is this is about to take a whole new turn. First of all, the MSCI, as it's called, is going to ramp up the percentage of Chinese companies of the kind I've mentioned to 20% of its portfolio. But specifically, the board that oversees the Thrift Savings Plan, as it's known, TSP, the Federal Retirement System. It goes by the name of the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board. I think of it as its acronym FARTIB. FARTIB has decided several years ago, actually, that in 2020, they are going to have this thrift savings plan mirror the MSCI. What does that mean? That means that government employees, past and present, civilian and military, are going to start having their pension funds invested in the same way as the MSCI, that is to say, in communist Chinese companies, some of which, let's be clear, we're talking about military personnel, we're talking about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the combatant commanders, all of their senior subordinates, and on down the line. Their money is going to be going into companies that are building weapons with which to kill them.
And what's remarkable here, and our American companies are working with Chinese government, and they won't work with our government, and this is just such a corrupt system. And so then there are reports that the White House is going to limit this in some way, and then it sounds like Peter Navarro pushed back on it that it's not going to happen. Why would we participate in in Chinese hegemony here, which it sounds like is what we're doing?
It is what we're doing. It's precisely what we're doing, unwittingly for most of us, though with, I'm afraid, the connivance of people on Wall Street who are going to make their money on these deals, and they may make money for their investors. That's an open question, honestly. Some evidence I've seen suggests that pensioners are actually suffering as a result of these kinds of transactions. But either way, they're going to suffer if the consequences of these investments is, as I fear they are, going to be greatly strengthening. And let's face it, this is happening against the backdrop. Our conversation today is on the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going.
We saw this parade going on in the streets of Beijing, under lockdown, by the way. They don't trust their own people, obviously. But what we're seeing is an immense array of weapons, some of which have been subsidized by us, I'm quite sure, that are designed to hurt this country, hurt its military personnel, and probably kill vast numbers of us in the process. So these are the sorts of things that I think ought to tell us we don't want the thrift savings plan, for starters, to be making this kind of investment. President Trump, I believe, can turn this around. And interestingly enough, Peter Navarro made some deprecatory comments about this idea of not having the Chinese in our capital markets plundering our investments. But he went on to note that there are legitimate grounds to be concerned about the thrift savings plan. So let's start with that. We can agree the federal entire retirement system should not be used to help build the threat from communist China to our people and our country.
Absolutely. This is so clear cut. And Navarro has been really one of the more excellent people in the administration. So I'm surprised and concerned here. I'll be boning up on this. I've enlisted John Carney, our economic and finance expert, to make this a priority. But Frank, thanks for bringing this to our attention, because this is just a total no-brainer to me. I can't believe we would do this as the American people participating in this. The enabling the Chinese communists to grow and thrive. This is total insanity to me. I honestly do not get it. What is the argument that this is okay?
The argument that it's okay is most Americans aren't going to know about it, A, and B, those who are in on the secret will perhaps benefit financially. And most especially, again, the guys who are making commissions on these transactions, those are the guys who are going to benefit.
Bums me out.
About that.
I'm bummed out.
Alex, what you're all about is exposing these kinds of things. And once this is exposed to the light of day, I don't believe the American people are going to tolerate it. And President Trump needs to get right on it.
I have to tell you, Frank, having been involved in a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand of these types of stories, that is the pattern. It is. I'm happy to say that when something is clear cut a bad idea, it is just a matter of once it gets exposed, it does tend to go away, because we have free press and we have a republic, so people get to vote. So free. Great point. Free-ish. Yeah, well, that was actually my opening today. I talked a lot about how we are moving into an era of where corruption is kind of normalized in the United States, which I never thought was going to be upon us, but it is here. For Frank, I want to. By the way, Master Marlow is in studio today. Frank. We're savoring every minute together because he's been impeached for pre-crimes. My 13-month-old. So, because that's the new standard now. It used to be high crimes and misdemeanors. Now AOC has moved the goalposts. It's now pre-crimes. You can be impeached. So it's a tough moment in the Marlow household. But let's talk a little bit about. I want to get your thoughts on the latest witch hunt. I want to get your thoughts. But we're on China, a 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Lots of demonstrations. Xi Jinping even spoke. What do we need to know about this moment?
I found fascinating this sort of side story, which is that the government of China doesn't trust its own people to participate in the celebration, as it calls it. It was in lockdown. Beijing was in lockdown today. And yes, there were the 15,000 goose-stepping servicemen and women in the streets of Tiananmen Square. But the people of China had to watch this on their flat screens. Apparently, they gave away 650,000 of them, and their phones in order to get some sense of what was going on.
It reminds me of Mao's bicycles, by the way.
Well, that's right. The message that was being sent by what was on display there was China has now stolen a march on most especially the United States, has amassed this immense nuclear and conventional arsenal with which it will threaten the world and ultimately dominate it. And the Chinese people, enslaved as they are, this is what makes this one of the darkest days in world history for me. 70 years of brutalizing people, brainwashing them, murdering them by the countless millions, Alex, is what the Chinese regime is celebrating today. And the rest of us have to just watch on with horror and, I hope, a new resolve to resist.
Sure, and you can bet we'll have top-notch coverage of this today from Francis Martel at Breitbart. I got to play this clip for you. I spent 10 minutes on it at the end of yesterday's show, Frank. And again, Frank Gaffney is with me. He normally joins me on Wednesdays. I will disclose why he's here today later in the broadcast, but I appreciate you accommodating us, Frank. Executive Chairman of Center for Security Policy, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Present Danger of China. Michael Bloomberg on PBS firing line. There's so much insanity here. I'm guessing we won't get through the whole clip, but let's just play a taste of it. Have you heard it, Frank? Have you heard this interview?
I have heard of it. I have not heard of it.
It's going to blow your mind. Start it, Mr. Paul, 16A.
So the United States currently accounts for about 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yes. China accounts for roughly 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. How do we, even if we get to net zero, how do you get China, India, and the other countries to be good partners?
China is doing a lot. Yes, they're still building a bunch of coal-fired power plants.
And they're still burning coal.
Yes, they are. But they are now moving plants away from the cities. The Communist Party wants to stay in power in China, and they listen to the public. When the public says, I can't breathe the air, Xi Jinping is not a dictator. He has to satisfy his constituents, or he's not going to survive.
He's not a dictator?
No, he has a constituency to answer to.
He doesn't have a vote. He doesn't have a democracy. He's not held accountable by voters.
If his advisors gave him...
Is the check on him just a revolution?
You're not going to have a revolution. No government survives without the will of the majority of its people. Okay? It's just...
All right, so we'll leave there. Frank, that's about the first 40% of it, and it doesn't get any better. So first of all, he says that there, which is, I know, not your bailiwick, but I'll throw this out there, that China's doing a great job on the environment, which they're not. By doing what? Moving plants out of the city very slowly. And then he says he's not a dictator and that no government can ever survive without the will of the people. I mean, you have to give me a reaction.
Said by a man who obviously is determined to sell countless millions of Bloomberg terminals to communist China, don't you think? I mean, this bears no relationship to reality. It is the kind of supine appeasement of China that has characterized Bloomberg's friends on Wall Street, and for that matter, the larger. I don't want to lay this all at Wall Street's feet. Generations of American policymakers of both parties, Alex, as if you know, pursued this idea of engagement on the theory that the Chinese are not dictators, or if they are, they're going to reform into, being part of the civilized international community, or they're going to open up, or they're going to be somehow less threatening. None of which has worked out. We need to be clear. 70 years of this is actually proof positive that you can control people ruthlessly, especially if you can bring to bear the kinds of technologies that American investments are making possible in China. This so-called social credit score system for repressing people. The Chinese are past masters at dictatorship and at the rule of the gun or the bayonet or the cyber instruments of repression. Michael Bloomberg could not be more wrong or could not be misguided, and either he is completely fatuously deceiving himself or he is simply part of the process whereby we are being lied to relentlessly.
This is sci-fi to me, Frank. I mean, this is the could you picture if this man had actual power? I mean, it's funny for us. It's great content for us. Even Master Marlow wants to chip in here. But the could you picture what if he was president? What if he was could you imagine the propaganda campaign? I mean, I can't even believe he wants to be president. He would love to be president. Could you believe that this man actually had any authority? And this is what he thinks. He's been completely oblivious to what's going on, or he's just a liar. And you're right. And he's already been co-opted. It's really, it is so frightening to me, this clip.
But is it that different, Alex? Let's be honest. Is it that different from what we were hearing from Joe Biden not so long ago? I mean, he had something of a change of heart, we're told, but honestly, especially with Hunter Biden.
No, he was saying very similar. This is a little more extreme.
But it's of a piece. Let's face it. Don't worry. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Let's just keep doing business with them. It'll get better. No, it's not perfect. Maybe they will acknowledge, but it's getting better. Well, I'm sorry, just as an example, Alex, moving polluting coal-fired power plants away from the cities may somewhat mitigate the damage that the Chinese government has done to its own people, but that pollution still circles the globe.
Of course, it's global climate emissions. It's a total. This is a farce. Exactly. Do you think Donald Trump could get away with that? He would be mocked relentlessly if he's, well, we're just going to move the plants outside the city. Okay, I got two more quick ones, Frank, I need to get to with you. China, according to reports, has a nuclear missile that can reach the United States in 30 minutes. This is a Chinese government report, so we have no clue how much of it's true. But what was your reaction to it?
Well, that's not that much longer a time or shorter a time, for that matter, than what the Russians or before them the Soviet Union has had. It's a very, very troubling development because these missiles are now unmistakably designed for that purpose, to deliver not just a single warhead to our country, but multiple warheads. And again, Alex, let's remember, the multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, as they're called, the MIRV technology, was provided to the Communist Chinese government by, wait for it, Bill Clinton and companies like Loral during the Clinton era, when we were indifferent, as we are substantially now in certain quarters of our economy, at least, our Wall Street types, and some in government still, to the idea that, hey, we can let China have access to technology that is unmistakably, at best, dual-use technology. We were told they were going to be used for satellite deployments, but heavens, they are being used now to threaten our country. And whether it's 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 20 minutes, it's a nightmare, especially as they're building more all the time, relentlessly.
Frank, I got one more, and we could probably do 3 hours on the UN General Assembly meeting, but Pakistani President Imran Khan suggesting that radical Islam doesn't exist. And by the way, he's has not been the worst case scenario there for us in Pakistan. And he saying radical Islam doesn't exist, Frank. So apparently your whole life has been a fraud, by the way.
Well, this is what we call, or more to the point, they call Turkiya in support of Sharia supremacism, Alex. There is a fraud here, but unfortunately it's not what we've been saying about this. This is what we are confronting from those who believe that if they simply tell us often enough that they're the victims, they can get away with the most oppressive, horrific kind of, tyranny. And let me just say, one of the good things about this UNGA exercise took place on Friday. I had the privilege of actually having a small speaking part in it, but 4 different foreign ministers, that of Hungary, that of Brazil, that of the UK, a Muslim no less, and that of the Philippines, all joined to talk about the plight of persecuted Christians, the vast majority of whom, by the way, some 80%, are being afflicted around the world by Sharia supremacists. Yes, the Chinese communists, yes, the North Koreans are doing their bit, but the vast majority of this is at the hands of people who are not being victimized. They are victimizers in the interest of imposing Sharia on us all. Pakistan is one of the worst of these malefactors, and I just want to give huge thanks to the Brazilians and the Hungarians for putting this program on. It's available at the website of the UN. We should have it at SaveThePersecutedChristians.org as well very shortly.
Wonderful stuff, Frank Gaffney, securefreedom.org, counterjihad.com, presentdangerchina.org. Frank, we'll talk to you next Wednesday, my friend. Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, Alex.
We'll be right back.